So while I have the tubes of my Mark V soaking away in evaporust, I got to looking around thinking, well, what else in here needs some TLC? And I remembered this thing back here, which I don't think you've seen. This is a multi-purpose tool of sorts, and it's got a really interesting history. The manufacturer of this was actually you. You would, in the back of Popular Science, Popular Mechanics magazine, you would place an order from a company called Gilliom Power Tools in St. Louis, Missouri. And Lyle Gilliam would send you, at your request, really beautifully hand-drawn plans. And you could just go from there if you wanted to, scrounging together parts, or he would sell you those parts either as a full kit or pieces and parts, and you could build it a la carte. What could you build? Well, there was a 12-inch bandsaw, there was an 18-inch bandsaw that you could build, a 6-inch belt sander, quite a number of tools that are not coming to mind. But this tool right here, oh, a table saws. What am I thinking? I have a 10-inch tilting arbor table saw that was built from a kit from the Gilliom Power Tool Company. Their kits were sold under the name Gil-Bilt, Gil-Bilt. And this, I mentioned, is a multi-purpose tool. Let me show you what it is. You can see from your vantage point already, it's a lathe, and it's a lathe that's made from conduit. You just provide your own conduit, or you could even use steel tubing to produce this. It has a tailstock, and you can see the tailstock has something of a quill to it that allows you to extend, and then, oddly enough, with your Shopsmith toolbox, with your 5/32 hex wrench, you could lock that in place in any position. Over here on the headstock end, similarly, 5/32 set screw, locking your accessories onto a 5/8 inch shaft. Now, it's a threaded shaft with a flat, so there were other things you could attach to this in addition to your spur drive. So, for example, I could put a drill chuck on here. The drill chuck could go into the tailstock. They even sold, I think I got one over here. Yes, I do. They cast and sold their own face plates. Again, this faceplate has a 5/8 inch shaft in the middle of it. So would be interchangeable with Shopsmith accessories. Check this out. I can even, if I happen to own it, if I have an adapter, where did it go? It's way over here. And if I have the appropriate adapter, I could even put my one-way chuck onto this lathe. How wild is that? I'm not going to force it on there because it is in pretty rough shape. Currently, I have the tool rest off of the machine, but you can see that in a similar manner to the way the headstock and the tailstock are attached, this is going to lock here between the tubes, and with a wrench, you would tighten and move this. I guess you would loosen and move it. Then you'd tighten it. What makes this a multi-purpose tool is the fact that with the release of a lock over here, I can take this and tilt it up, and it'll latch automatically and locks into a vertical position. Now that's interesting. Well, we know we can put a chuck on here, but what's going to do the job of the table? Well, remember that faceplate? Believe it or not, this goes onto the tailstock, and there's a particular orientation, I guess, for this one. There we go. And then locks in place with the set screw. Now you might look at that and say to yourself, Self, that looks a little weird. Yeah, because it gets really weird when you think about that you are actually raising and lowering the table and your material that you're drilling. You're raising it into the drill bit. Now, this seems odd to most people, but if you take a look at many of the precision drill presses that are used by watchmakers and even some jewelry makers and others, they work in exactly that same way. The headstock is rigid, and you're raising and lowering the table and the stock that you're drilling. What is surprisingly accurate about this is the fact that these spindles are always in alignment with each other. So if I take a piece of stock and clamp it to this table, and even though the table might rotate a little bit on that quill, on the tailstock, it is always directly underneath the drill bit and will give me a precise hole. This handle will pass through if I need to go deeper yet. And there we go. Now you want to see it run, don't you? It's okay. We're going to see it run, but it's super duper sketchy. It needs to be completely rewired and reworked. But I have it plugged into a different switch. And, well, check this out. Contact. Yeah, I'm with you. Just had to move the tailstock up a little bit. Let's do this. Let's make a mark. Let's make a target. Let's get you in here to see a few more of the details. Oh, look, square nut. Here's the latch. Oh, no, that isn't a latch. Oh, I was confused. No, that's just applying tension to the belt. Oh, that's interesting. That's all that does. Looks like they scavenged this motor from some appliance. And as an option, you could buy the hardware to produce the base if you didn't want to have to do that on your own. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the instructions that would have been used to build this. I'm looking for them. Of course, they'll show up on eBay eventually. But I have purchased plans for a few other machines, and this one was sold to somebody in 1984. And to give you an idea of what you would get from the company, this happens to be a complete set of plans for building both the 18-inch bandsaw as well as a smaller bandsaw. This is the 12-inch bandsaw. Interestingly, as you look at these instructions, they're even showing you here this exact same base that I have for my drill press being used here for the 12-inch bandsaw. So lots of parts are interchanged from one machine to another. This part right here that's used for tracking and tension is used for tracking and tension on both sizes of the bandsaw as well as the 6-inch belt sander. So very clever reuse of components, very much the same way that the Shopsmith and the 10ER used common off-the-shelf components as well. You know, once you cast something, you look for ways to use it in different places, and that's exactly what the company did. Here's an example of a full-size template that was included, and this is one of several that were included in this particular instruction. So what happened to this company? Well, eventually Mr. Gilliom passed, and the company was sold, and it was owned by somebody named Thompson. I remember speaking with Mr. Thompson about 15 years ago. They would answer their phone. They did not have a web presence, and eventually they went away completely. At the time, I was writing a blog and kind of amassing data that I could find about these tools. I'd known about them since I was a kid, reading the backs of magazines. But if you're interested, I'll put a link to that blog down below. It's very incomplete, but there is some stuff there that might be of interest to you. If you happen to be a descendant of any of these folks, I'd love to talk to you. My email address is also down in the video description. I have a few more of their tools that we'll take a look at one of these days. But for now, I got to say, make it a great day.